watching All 24 News World News Program. To the headlines. New strikes in Gaza leave more than 100 dead, violating the ceasefire according to Hamas. Separately, the WHO says malnutrition has killed hundreds this year. In Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces are accused of executing hundreds at a hospital. Aid groups say over 2,000 have been killed in the city, sparking international calls to stop the flow of weapons. Also on news tonight, Algeria meets with China and Pakistan, strengthening diplomatic ties and discussing key Security Council issues, including the Western Sahara file. And drones hit Russian infrastructure in Moscow. Russia is accused of striking a children's hospital, while a Kremlin official predicts the war's end within a year. Welcome back. In a new breach of the October 11 ceasefire, occupation forces have killed more than 100 Palestinians in a series of overnight airstrikes on homes and displacement tents across Gaza Strip. The casualties include 35 children. Usama Ayadi reports now.
As it has traditionally broken all promises and violated every agreement, the Zionist occupation reneges on the Gaza agreement. The wounds of Gaza have not yet healed until the occupation brings back the painful scenes of farewell to the devastated Strip, killing dozens of civilians, most of them children and women.
It was erased from the civil registry. An entire family of about 9 people, the father, the son, his wife, his son's wife, and all the children were completely removed from the civil registry.
In less than 12 hours, more than 100 Palestinians were killed in bloody massacres perpetrated by the occupation against civilians in homes and tents, sheltering displaced people in various areas of the Strip. Most of the victims of the new Zionist aggression against the Strip are the helpless and defenseless children. Their number has exceeded 35 martyrs targeted by the occupation's missiles while they slept.
It's not a military operation area, nor an area with tunnels, nor a place holding hostages. There is nothing. The only goal was killing. This is an act of genocide.
Massacres were perpetrated by the occupation forces under the pretext that Hamas had carried out sniper operations against its forces in Rafah, despite the movement's denial and its assertion that it had no connection to the operation. Furthermore, the movement called upon the mediators guaranteeing the agreement to take immediate action to pressure the occupation and curb its brutal aggression against civilians.
I
was sleeping in the tent below, under them, in our tent with my father, my sister, and my mother. We woke up and found nothing. There was only rubble on top of us.
With Western support, the occupation continues its barbaric war, which began on October 7, 2023, and has included killing, starvation, destruction, and displacement, ignoring all international appeals and the Court of Justice's orders to end the genocide.
The government media office in Gaza announced on Wednesday that the number of journalists martyred since the start of the genocidal war on the Gaza Strip has risen to 256. The update follows the killing of journalist Mohammed al-Munirawi and his wife in a Zionist airstrike that targeted their tent in the Nusayrat refugee camp. The office condemned the systematic targeting and assassination of Palestinian journalists, urging media organizations worldwide to denounce these ongoing crimes against the press. Hamas representative in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, condemned the Zionist escalation in Gaza as a grave violation of the agreement, saying the latest aggression proves the occupation's intention to undermine the deal and provoke a military response from the resistance.
هذا تصعيد وخرق خطير وصارخ للاتفاق.
This is a serious and blatant escalation and violation of the agreement. It is an extension of a series of continuous violations over the past few days, including the closure of crossings, preventing the entry of necessary equipment, and obstructing the retrieval of bodies. All these violations emboldened the occupation to commit the direct murder of more than 100 civilians in a single night. Yesterday's aggression, which targeted schools, mosques, tents, and the remains of displaced people's homes, confirms that the occupation seeks to undermine the agreement and push the movement into a military response to these attacks, or to import new rules of engagement that would grant the occupation the right to kill and attack without any repercussions.
تعطي للاحتلال الحق بالقتل والاعتداء دون أن يمنعه أحد.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly condemned the Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip, denouncing the killing of civilians, including many children, in the latest airstrikes. His spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric, said Guterres condemns all actions that violate the ceasefire and put civilian lives at risk. The World Health Organization revealed that 421 people, including 113 children, have died in the Gaza Strip from malnutrition amid the ongoing Zionist aggression. In a statement Wednesday, the WHO attributed the deaths to severe food shortages and the collapse of health services caused by the blockade and the occupation's restrictions on humanitarian aid entering the Strip. UN human rights reporter Francesca Albanese has called the current Gaza peace plan misleading and insulting, saying it lacks legal and moral legitimacy. She stated that a true agreement cannot be built on violations of international law, describing the situation not as a war, but as an ongoing aggression against an occupied people.
Never seen before and newly assembled.
A peace agreement cannot be built on the violation of international law, and I do not trust the people responsible for this process. I do not trust this peace process because I do not trust those in charge of it. A peace agreement cannot be built on the violation of international law. Israel does not want Palestinians in Gaza. This stance has been clear for years. Describing the agreement as a ceasefire is misleading because what is happening in Gaza is not a war between two states or two armies, but an assault on an occupied people living in a ghetto since 1948. It is unreasonable to grant a state accused before two international courts of committing war crimes and genocide the authority to determine the future of the Palestinians.
Hamas called on all Palestinians to confront the occupation's settlement policies, describing them as an existential threat to Al-Quds Arab and Islamic identity. The movement said Zionist authorities issued demolition and stop work orders for around 30 homes east of Al-Quds as part of efforts to empty the city of its Palestinian residents.
The delivery of demolition notices by the occupation authorities and the halt of construction for about 30 homes in the towns of Al-Aysawiyah and Al-Zaim and East Al-Quds constitutes a new Zionist crime. This fascist policy aims to empty the city of Al-Quds and its towns of Palestinians in an attempt to erase its Arab and Islamic identity. We call on our people and national forces to confront these settlement policies, which pose an existential threat to our Palestinian people and to the city of Al-Quds. We also call on the international community and all international organizations to condemn these occupation plans, which amounts to act of ethnic cleansing.
More than 150 contributors to the New York Times have signed a letter pledging to boycott the newspaper over what they called its biased coverage of the Gaza war. According to the Middle East Eye, the signatories said contributing to the paper amounts to endorsing its bias, urging management to review its reporting and adopt fair editorial standards on the Palestinian issue.
Until the New York Times takes accountability for its biased coverage and commits to truthfully and ethically reporting on the US-Israeli war on Gaza, any putative challenge to the newsroom or the editorial board in the form of a first-person essay is in effect permission to continue this small practice, We owe it to the journalists and writers of Palestine to refuse complicity with the newspaper and to demand that the newspaper account for its failures, such that it can never again manufacture consent for mass slaughter, torture, and displacement.
Moving on to the war in Sudan now. The Al-Fashar Resistance Coordination Committee accused the Rapid Support Forces of executing wounded patients at the Saudi hospital in Al-Fashar, North Darfur. In a statement, the committee said RSF members killed critically injured individuals on the third day of their control of the city, noting that the hospital was the only one still operating. The Sudanese Doctors Network accused the Rapid Support Forces of committing systematic genocide against civilians in Darfur, calling for their prosecution before international courts. In statements to All24 News on Wednesday, spokesperson Mohammed Faisal said the RSF and its leaders are fully responsible for the massacres in Al-Fashar hospitals that killed dozens of patients and wounded people. The Sudanese Humanitarian Aid Commission announced that more than 2,000 civilians, mostly women and children, were killed in the recent Rapid Support Forces attacks on Al-Fashar, the capital of North Darfur. Deputy Commissioner Muna Noor Daim said Wednesday that the RSF carried out targeted killings based on ethnicity, pursuing thousands of families and committing horrific crimes against them.
In the days following the storming of Al-Fashar, the number of mercenaries in the city exceeded 2,000. Most of the victims were women, children, and the elderly. They targeted and killed all the leaders of the city's security forces. The city was under siege, and the staff of the soup kitchens and communal kitchens, which were barely able to provide aid, were executed. Even basic necessities in Al-Fashar had become extremely scarce. As you all know, prices had skyrocketed. The market had become completely reliant on soup kitchens and communal kitchens. Humanitarian and medical personnel were targeted in general, as was the field team of the Sudanese Red Crescent Society. Thousands of families were displaced and their belongings were left behind during their exodus.
The Sudanese Foreign Ministry urged the international community to label this Rapid Support Forces a terrorist organization, citing extensive evidence. Foreign Minister Hussein Al-Amin Al-Fadl said the RSF continues its crimes with impunity, defying UN Resolution 2736 on Al-Fashar, and condemned the international community for equating the RSF with the government.
What Sudan is witnessing in terms of violations is unprecedented in the world's history over these past 30 months, surpassing even the world wars and the genocidal wars that have taken place elsewhere. Regrettably, the militia itself documents its crimes and broadcasts them to the world through all available means and media, in full view of the international community, yet there is no response. The international community continues to equate the Sudanese government with the terrorist militia, and many officials speak of a war between two generals or two factions vying for power.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres voiced deep concern over the escalating violence in Al-Fashar, urging an immediate halt to the flow of weapons and fighters into the besieged city. United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees officials said the Rapid Support Forces' control of Al-Fashar has forced about 26,000 people to flee, while thousands remain trapped and face killings, torture, and other grave human rights abuses at armed checkpoints.
For the past week alone, 26,000 new arrivals have been registered, have been received in Tawila. The stories that we hear through my colleagues that are on the ground in Tawila, providing protection services for new arrivals, report of widespread ethnically and politically motivated killing indiscriminate violence affecting in particularly the most vulnerable. We have accounts of people with disabilities who were executed, who were killed as they were unable to flee. But we also hear people that are trying to leave the city and manage to get out of the city, but on the way they're caught up and they are also being shot for unknown reasons.
Moving on to a different news story, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf discussed with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi ways to strengthen the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. According to the Foreign Ministry, the phone call focused on advancing bilateral cooperation, especially in the economic field, in line with the priorities set by the leadership of both nations. Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf also discussed with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi key issues on the UN Security Council's agenda this month. According to the Foreign Ministry, the talks included the question of decolonization in Western Sahara before the Council. Algeria and China have agreed to deepen their cooperation, moving toward a strategic partnership. The strengthened ties formalized through new agreements focused on energy, agriculture, and technology transfer. The two nations also pledged to coordinate their positions on various international issues. Nabil Khazini has more.
When friendship between nations is built on trust, shared history, and mutual respect, it lays the foundation for a lasting partnership. This is precisely what defines the relationship between Algeria and China, a solid alliance shaped by decades of cooperation. Over the years, Algiers and Beijing have steadily strengthened their ties through extensive collaboration across key sectors. Their partnership was moved beyond traditional trade relations to encompass broader goals of development, innovation, and sustainability. A series of agreements between the two sides has focused on areas such as technology transfer, infrastructure development, and investment in emerging industries, underscoring a shared commitment to modernization and growth. Today, that cooperation has evolved into a reinforced strategic partnership, reflecting both nations' determination to deepen their engagement and expand their role in shaping a more interconnected global economy. Algeria-China cooperation spans multiple strategic sectors. In energy, a partnership between China's Jera engineering company and Algeria's Sonatrach has shifted from commercial exchange to a strategic collaboration focused on expertise, transfer, technology, and infrastructure development. In the iron industry, joint investment in the Garage Bilat mine, one of Algeria's largest mining projects, complements ongoing cooperation in railways, a key element of Algeria's economic transformation. The partnership also extends to military cooperation, strengthened through reciprocal visits by the chiefs of staff of both countries. On the international stage, Algiers and Beijing maintain coordinated positions in major bodies such as the UN Security Council, particularly on issues like the Western Sahara issue, emphasizing solutions in line with UN resolutions, and the Decolonization Committee's mandate, reflecting decades of consistent shared vision.
Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar bin Jama, reaffirmed Algeria's firm support for ending the unjust economic, commercial, and financial embargo imposed on Cuba for more than 60 years. Addressing the UN General Assembly, bin Jama said the blockade violates international law and the UN Charter, particularly the principles of state sovereignty and non-interference.
Guided by the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, Algeria reiterates its unwavering support for the immediate and unconditional lifting of the unjust economic, commercial, and financial embargo imposed on Cuba for more than 6 decades. This policy This policy runs contrary to the fundamental principles of international law and of the Charter of the United Nations.
Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf discussed with his Pakistani Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar ways to strengthen bilateral ties. According to the Foreign Ministry, the two ministers in a phone call Wednesday stressed the importance of continued coordination within the UN Security Council and reviewed key issues on its agenda this month. President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, attended the final of the 53rd Algerian Military Cup on Wednesday at the Military Sports Teams Training Center in Ben Aknoun in Algiers, the capital. It was received by Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Said Chingriha. The Republican Guard team won the title against the Joint Services team in a penalty shootout following a goalless draw. Shifting focus to a different news story. The Sahrawi community in Belgium, Sweden, the Netherlands, Italy, and Spain reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination is non-negotiable and inalienable. In a statement, they stressed that this right is legal, moral, and sovereign and cannot be compromised or used for political manipulation.
The Sahrawi people's right to self-determination is a legal, moral, and sovereign right, enshrined, inalienable, and not open to negotiation, compromise, or political appropriation. Any attempt to impose unilateral solutions is null and void, contradicting the charters of the United Nations and the African Union and violating the principles of international law. The only just and viable solution is a referendum that allows the Sahrawi people to determine their own destiny and decide their political future. We reaffirm our unwavering commitment and steadfast support for the Polisario Front as the safeguard against all schemes aimed at dismantling the Sahrawi national project or undermining its legitimacy.
Sahrawi Finance Minister Mohammed Mouloud Hamada stated that his country is committed to the African Union's goal of continental integration by 2063. He emphasized the need to transform the AU into a strong economic bloc to accelerate the African free trade area and develop continental infrastructure.
يشكل هذا اللقاء محطة مفصلية في مسار.
This meeting represents a pivotal milestone in our continent's path toward achieving the shared African vision, an integrated, connected, and prosperous Africa by 2063. Continental integration today is developmental, security, and economic necessity, driven by global transformations and the aspirations of African peoples for just and shared prosperity. We must recognize the importance of transforming the African Union from a political union into an effective economic bloc. In this context, coordinated political will is the true key to accelerating the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area initiatives and to building modern infrastructure that connects African capitals, cities, ports, and markets into one unified network, paving the way toward achieving the objectives of Agenda 2063.
Moving on to another global news story. Ukraine launched drone attacks on several Russian regions Wednesday for the third straight day, disrupting air traffic across the country. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said the capital was hit by several waves of drones, while Rosa Vyetsia confirmed the temporary closure of 3 of Moscow's 4 airports and others nationwide for security reasons. Kiev accused Moscow of bombing a children's hospital in the southern city of Kherson on Wednesday, injuring 9 people, including 4 children. Ukrainian Human Rights Commissioner Dmytro Lubinets said 3 of the wounded were medical staff and confirmed the hospital suffered major damage, calling the strike a deliberate attack on civilian property in violation of international law. Kirill Dmitriev, special envoy of President Vladimir Putin, predicted that the war in Ukraine will end within a year, stressing that Russia does not seek further escalation. Speaking at the Future Investment Initiative in Riyadh, he said Moscow is on the path to peace and called for intensified efforts to end the conflict rather than deepen it. Pakistan announced Wednesday that the talks with Afghanistan failed to achieve a permanent ceasefire, vowing to take all measures to protect its civilians. Information Minister Atallah Tariq said the Afghan side offered no guarantees, avoided key issues, and resorted to blame shifting, leaving the dialogue without any practical outcome.
Very clearly, spelled out that there won't be any incursions.
China on Wednesday said that Chinese President Xi Jinping is on a course to meet U.S. counterpart Donald Trump in South Korea's Busan on Thursday. Trump is now in South Korea at a summit meeting of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, where he is due to meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Trade tensions between the U.S. and China, the world's two biggest economies, have lingered. Disputes over tariffs, technology, and market access remain unresolved.
Head of State diplomacy plays an irreplaceable strategic guiding role in China-US relations. During this meeting, the two presidents will engage in depth communication on strategic and long-term issues concerning China-US relations, as well as major topics of mutual concern. We are willing to make joint efforts with the United States to ensure the meeting produces positive outcomes and to provide fresh guidance and new impetus for the stable development of China-US relations. We will release details on the meeting in due course.
And finally, Prime Minister Sifi Rib inaugurated the 28th Algiers International Book Fair on Wednesday at the Exhibition Palace under the patronage of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. The event, running from October 29 to November 8 under the theme, The Book, a Meeting Place of Cultures, brings together 1,254 publishers from 49 countries, including 290 Algerian houses, displaying over 240,000 titles. Mauritania is this year's guest of honor. That's the end of our news program for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.